This is Dreamvisions 7 Radio Network.
Welcome to the Anxious Voyage. If you think that title sounds bleak or foreboding, one of two things must be true. You're very lucky, or you need to get out more. On this program, we share stories of life and living. We compare notes. We discover commonalities. We accept that life is a glorious, heartbreaking thing, and we embrace and celebrate all of it. Take the ride with us. We're glad you're here. Now, here's your host, Mark O'Brien.
Hello and welcome indeed. This is a special day for a whole bunch of reasons, not least of which that I have Jennifer Loehding here with me as my guest today. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
And also, because I'm an O'Brien, I have to say that it's also special because it's St. Patrick's Day. And I'm going to take the liberty of telling a quick story. It's about an Irishman who's new in town. And he goes to a local bar and he sits down and he orders 3 beers. And the bartender gives him a quizzical look, shrugs his shoulders, goes and gets him 3 beers. The next day, the Irishman comes in and does exactly the same thing. The bartender gets him his beers. Irishman drinks them and leaves, comes back the third day and does the same thing. The bartender says to him, I don't mean to be intrusive, but do you mind if I ask you a question? And the Irishman says, sure. The bartender says, why is it that every time you come in here, you order 3 beers? And he said, because when I left the old country, I left my 2 brothers behind. And I promised them every time I stopped for a pint, I'd order one. I'd have one for each of them. So this goes on for a few weeks. And one day the Irishman comes in, he orders 2 beers. So the bartender thinks for a moment, goes and gets him 2 beers. This too takes place 3 days in a row. And the bartender comes over and says to the Irishman, I'm sorry, I don't mean to get personal, but I'm sorry for your loss. The Irishman says, what do you mean? And the bartender says, remember the story you told me that you would also have one for each of your 2 brothers? I thought one of them must have passed away. And the Irishman said, no. It's Lent. I gave up the drink.
That's great.
Thank you. That was not an original. So if you like it, that's good. And if you don't blame me. So anyway, Jennifer, I am so glad you're here. As Dizzy, our producer, said, we actually did a show before the show because you and I just, from the first time we met, thanks to Dominic Damaski, we just hit it off, obviously. So there's a million places I could jump in here, but I'm just going to start. You talk a lot about journey. I call this program the Anxious Voyage. In my mind, journey and voyage are the same thing. So we certainly think about it that way. You also mentioned that you had suffered from what you called this time a health crisis. Because among other things, I would like people who watch or listen to this program to know what's possible and what they're capable of. Would you share some of that with us, please?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, where do we start with this story? Oh my gosh. Yes. So in 2012, I was diagnosed with a rare nerve condition called trigeminal neuralgia. And just to kind of back your audience up a little bit about my background, I was in Mary Kay for a really, really long time. Thought I was going to be in that industry forever. And then was also a mom to 3 young children at the time, 16, 12, and 8. And so when I tell people where I was at that time, I was a homeroom mom, the PTA mom, the field trip mom. I was like involved mom, right? And then I was also running this business. And then I go into the dentist for what we call a minor procedure and come out 5 months later, I'm diagnosed with this rare nerve condition. And so my world was completely ripped out from underneath me, right? Like just taken away. And so I spent the better part of 4 years in and out of doctors trying to navigate that condition. But what ended up happening, and this is where I talk about pivotal moments when we have choices that we can change the direction of where we're headed. And we can do this at any time. I'm getting chills just thinking about this because I started working with a holistic practitioner. And this was really before I knew anything about like holistic health, any realm of this. Like, I trusted the doctors, but what I found out, was 6 medications into this, that was not solving the problem. So we had to go to alternative methods. And so I went into this holistic practitioner, and I documented this in my book. I remember him asking me something along the lines of, what was going on in your life at the onset of this situation? And I remember kind of backing up and getting kind of mad about it. Like, how dare you ask me this question? I went in to have a dental procedure done. I come out. Now I have a crisis on my hands, right? And I've been dealing with this, and it's not going away. And so little did I know that it was going to be that encounter, that moment, that would be basically a triggering moment that would ensue and get me to where I am today. Because what happened in the aftermath of that was really an exploration to heal myself, because it really wasn't just about finding out, like, how do I heal that physical body, right? I started realizing that it was more complex than that. It became about not just how I was feeling, but how I was thinking, how I was acting out every day. All of these things were coming into place. And I will tell you that ultimately, I went on a ketogenic diet for 2 years. I became a marathon runner during that time. I mean, I started making physical changes, but I did not see, this is true story, did not see the results of my efforts until 11 months after going on a ketogenic diet. That's how sick I was. And so I had to rely on faith. I knew that I couldn't stay in the situation that I was in. I couldn't stay on taking opiates for the rest of my life. I wouldn't be able to be in the face of my children. And so I had to make a decision. But what happened is, in that 11th month, I had this little glimmer of hope. I remember being in my bathroom cleaning up. I was getting dressed. And all of a sudden, for a moment, I didn't feel the pain that I had felt for 4 years consecutively, day in, day out. It was like I had this little glimmer of, oh my gosh, I feel okay. And I knew that I was on to something. I knew at that moment that what I was doing was working. And so that really was the beginning stages of all this. And I tell people, it's like, where did you start with all this? I mean, it started with me trying to heal my body. And then it became about now talking about affirmations and gratitude and the circle of influence, and how I was living my life out, and the people that I was choosing to put in that space. And so it's been a very wild ride. And in 2022, ironically enough, I ended up getting diagnosed with another really weird condition, equally painful, but I have been better able to navigate that now, because I have the tools and the bandwidth, I say, in my brain and the mindset to actually work through that. So I don't know. I feel like I'm here, for a purpose, to share and give hope to people that no matter what you're going through, you have the ability. I'm not saying you can fix every single thing, but you have the ability to change the course, the direction of where you're headed.
You remind me that I have a friend actually who's been on this program, who survived a disease that was absolutely life-threatening. And now he describes himself as a designated survivor. And that's what it sounds like you are, that it's not just that you survived, but that you survived for a reason, and that your survival came packed with a bigger purpose.
It did. Well, and to your point, that particular disease that I got diagnosed with in the first time, it's actually labeled a suicide disease. So if you look it up, that's what they will tell you, because the pain is so intense. There were times when I would get up and I would just bang my head in the wall, because the way I explain it to people, I used to say that my head felt like it was in a vice grip, literally. But I just say, think of like the absolute worst tooth pain you could ever imagine. That's what it was like. It was like somebody was hitting me in the head with a baseball bat. So I do believe that, we are put here we all have a purpose and a calling. And I think that I have a voice, and somebody knew that I had that voice, and I needed to share something. And so that's really what I do in my work, with my podcast, the speaking, the training, all of the things that I do. It's really, for me, it's about helping people see that they can make a difference in their own lives. They just have to choose to get up and do that, to make that change.
And whether this is deliberate or not, I also believe that by making those kinds of changes in our own lives, we can, and again, whether it's deliberate or not, we can be examples for others. Like I firmly believe I am not capable of anything that anybody else would be capable of. But sometimes you just have to do those things. You said something when we were talking earlier. You said something about being able to look at ourselves, and then you said it can change our direction. It can put us on a different path. And this was your term. You said something constitutes a spark. And you said we have to recognize it and embrace it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I truly don't know if everyone recognizes those things when they happen. I know they happen, but I don't know if everybody recognizes them when they do.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think majority of people do not. I think that, I think some of us pick up on those things. It's like I was saying, you go through something and you recognize something's not right, and for me, I've always kind of been that inquisitive person that if something's not working, then I need to figure out how to navigate that. And I go back, I joke about this story all the time. As a young child, I was kind of a math and science person, believe it or not, which is so people are like, how is she a math and science person? But I was my favorite subjects. But I remember vividly working as a young child on these word problems. We would have to go through them and they would just baffle me. And my mom would come in and she would say, do you want me to show you how to do that? And I would say, no, because I wanted to figure it out myself, because there's power in figuring things out, right? Like we build confidence, we get grit, we get skills. So my stuff started way back then. I've always been that kind of person. But I think, if you start to see for me, I was seeing repeated patterns of chaos. And so what I mean by that crash and burn, and this became kind of the recognition of how looking at myself. I would have these very intense, as an achievement-oriented person, I would have very intense moments of super achieving power. Like I'm going all in, fully, powering away, and then I'd crash and burn. And the crash and burn when I was younger would just become like a mental thing where I would hide out. Like I'd just go into my cave and hide for a few days. And then it started turning into physical manifestations. And that's when I realized, when this doctor, this holistic practitioner brought this up and said, what were you doing at the onset of this? I don't know. Like I was angry at that moment, but at the same time, I'm thinking, what was I doing? How did I play a part in this? Like, what was my role in this situation? And it didn't come to me, Mark. I'm not going to tell you like that day I recognized. I wrote my book like 4 or 5 years after this occurred. Like this started 2012. I wrote the book in 2019. I was able in 2019, 7 years later, to reflect on that and go, now I know what he was talking about, because I was that mom doing more than I had to do or could do physically. I was doing it, but I was living in the fast food lane every single day with my children because I was driving them all over the place, right? And trying to get them everywhere. And so I agree with you. We don't always see it, but I think some of us do, and it takes a while. I think we all have these different moments, but you have to, I kind of look at it. I say we have to look at ourselves kind of like we're playing a video game. Like we're the character in the game, right? We have the controller. We get to control our lives and dictate how we want to do that. And when you kind of shift that perspective and say, pause and look and say, what am I doing? Like, how am I contributing to these situations? And I think it's exercising a muscle. The more you start to do this, the better you get at it. And once you do it, it's hard to now every encounter that I do, I look and I stop and I go, if I don't like the encounter, I stop and go, what was I doing in that? Because I just don't like the outcome in this. How did I contribute to this situation? What was my role in this? You know what I mean? It's a process.
I do. And there's now a million other things going through my head. And I just want to make a note to myself. But I was two things I was thinking about. If I had known you at the time and you had said to me, you know what, this doctor told me this today, now I got the whole thing figured out, I would be very, very worried about you, because you can't figure that out. No. And I connected it to something that you said a little while ago when you were talking about being a problem solver, and you didn't want your mom to do things for you because you wanted to know that you could do things. Obviously, that can be empowering, and obviously that can give one a better sense of oneself. But in my experience, it can also lead to two other things. It can either give us more humility, or it can make us arrogant.
Right.
In that we think, oh, come on, I can do that. I've done that.
Right.
And I guess I wonder about the relationship of that. I think it's a psychological question. I wonder why people respond to that differently. I mean, I think you and I share the idea that if I can do this, if I can figure this out, then that's just going to motivate me to think about the next thing and try to figure out this. Okay, I know this, but I don't know that yet. So I'm going to move on to that, as opposed to thinking, well, yeah, I got this.
Right. No, you raise a great point, and I agree with you. I think that's where the growth comes in. And I love that you said humility, because I think we also have to recognize we can't figure everything out. Right. And when I say that to you, that story in the beginning, that was really more about the tenacity of, and I will say this honestly, yes, that has served me well in a lot of cases. There's also times where it's not served me well, right? And I've been stubborn as a mule and had to be like, recognize the humility, right? But I think that's part of this process. And I think as we continue to evolve, we get better at recognizing our weakness. Like, I'm going to tell you, like, if somebody says something to me that I said I was being mean, because I'm very direct at times, and sometimes it gets perceived as I'm being mean because it's just direct. And then I may have to pause and take a look back and go, you know what, maybe I shouldn't have said that way. I apologize. I don't feel that let me say this, and this will make sense. I read a really good book by Jamie Kern Lehman. I may have mentioned it on my other show when you were there. She wrote a book called Worthy. And in the very beginning of the chapter, she talks about the difference between confidence and worth. And for years, and I'm telling you years, I'm in my early 50s, and this just occurred to me. They are different meanings. They're nuanced, different meanings. I thought they were combined, and they're not. And this is why you can have the skill set and be really good at something, but not really feel worthy and valued and be happy, right? Like, these are two separate things. We, as high achievers, a lot of times go into this idea that we have to prove ourselves to amass all this achievement. And this is certainly the way I was living much of my life, as I felt the need to achieve, to be loved. And then when I read this book, it was like this light bulb, another spark moment, this light bulb goes off. And I'm like, oh my goodness, because where I'm at now, and I'm not going to say this is perfect, because we are humans, we are completely evolving until the day we die. I'm not going to tell you there's never moments where I don't feel worthy, but I'm able to differentiate and separate those things that I do, the weaknesses, from my worth, and know that I still have value, and that it's okay if somebody calls me out on something. I'm not a bad human. For a long time, those went together. So if I felt like I was being criticized, I'd get defensive, right? They say that's the ego, you get defensive, and then that goes into, now I'm a bad human, right? And so, to your point, I think that yes, as we continue to evolve, those things can, as you mentioned, that can show either humility or tenacity, right? But I think as we continue to evolve, we also can start recognizing where we also need to work on ourselves and be mindful of behaviors. And I'm no one to say I know it all, like, I'm looking stuff up all the time. I still talk to people and say, give me feedback on this, because this is what I'm thinking. And I don't know if this is right, give it to me. It doesn't mean I'm always going to heed the advice, but I'm open to it, So I think it's an evolving thing.
You just reminded me of something else. Several weeks ago, I was involved in a conversation with, 20 or 30 other people. And the topic was psychological safety. So the topic got introduced, and there was kind of a little warm up by the person who was leading the conversation. And then we were all sent to breakout rooms on Zoom. And there were three other people in the breakout room. And I had no idea if anybody was going to want to speak first. So I just said, if nobody objects, I would like to start by saying, I don't think I understand the idea of psychological safety. And there was a British woman in my breakout room, and she said, that's because you know who you are. And I thought, wow, that never would have crossed my mind. But you reminded me of that when you were speaking just now, because if we are comfortable in our own skin and someone happens to take offense at what we've said, and presuming that it's not deliberate,
Right.
it costs us nothing, and it diminishes us not at all to think, oh, I wonder how I contributed to that situation. And an apology is not a weakness.
Right.
So what struck me as so brilliant about that, what that woman shared, was that for the most part, I would say I'm comfortable in my skin. I'm not perfect either. But if something goes sideways in a conversation or a relationship, I'm perfectly happy to explore whatever it is that might have been my role in that, my responsibility to that. I mean, there is responsibility
Mm-hmm.
in engaging with other people. Wow. We may end up being just a minute early, but this strikes me as the perfect time to take our first commercial break. A, because I love what we've just discussed, and two, or B, I should say, I know exactly where we're headed next. So let's take our first commercial break. We'll be right back.
Everybody has a story. Everyone's story deserves to be told, and the only bad stories are the ones we don't share. That's why Mark O'Brien created The Anxious Voyage. It's Mark's conviction that every story deserves to be shared, and his purpose is to give people in all walks of life, from any circumstances, a chance to tell their stories. The Anxious Voyage is now on syndicated Dreamvisions 7 radio network every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live broadcast every first and third Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Please tune in, please join Mark, and please share your stories.
Ever wonder what it's like to have your own radio show? Well, wonder no longer, because you can dip into the radio airwaves by being host for the day on syndicated Dreamvisions 7 radio network. It's a fabulous way to get your radio feet wet. It's an opportunity to market your business, modality, or book. Have a guest, mention a sponsor, and take callers. Or you may want to facilitate a lesson by going solo. It's up to you. Listeners can be online, mobile, in cars with Bluetooth, or listen through Amazon's Echo by asking, Alexa, play Dreamvisions 7 Radio Network. For more details, go to dreamvision7radio.com and click on Host for the Day.
You can't establish your brand's authority without a voice. That's why, since 2004, O'Brien Communications Group, OCG, has been helping companies establish their authority, find their brands, distinct voices, and position their brands effectively and persuasively. So effectively that 9 of OCG's clients have been acquired by other companies. OCG's business model emphasizes efficiency and results, not hourly billing, markups, and media commissions. That ensures OCG's advice is unbiased and its clients aren't at financial risk. If you're ready to find your voice and use it to tell your story, OCG is ready to help. You can find O'Brien Communications Group on the web at o'briencg.com. That's OBRIENCG.com, or call 860-944-9022.
Calling all authors. Have you been considering an audiobook? Well, look no further. Come take advantage of Dreamvisions 7 Radio Network's unique in-house audiobook production, which includes benefits and bonuses from our radio station. Let our knowledgeable staff guide you to create the audiobook you've always dreamed of without breaking the bank. Check out our full one-stop service from A to Z, including the ACX process. Schedule a free consultation by calling 508-226-1723. That's 508-226-1723. Or go to dreamvision7radio.com.
This is Dreamvision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for staying with us. And Jennifer, Thank you for being with me and such an amazing guest and conversationalist. I wish this didn't have to end, but when we were talking before the show, you mentioned, and sorry, I can't remember if it was someone you knew, but you were mentioning a woman who had been diagnosed with cancer. And in a conversation with her doctor, the idea of thought before action came up. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh my goodness, I'm drawing a blank.
Okay, no, that's okay. And when you said that, again, before the show,
yeah,
I wrote down the word manifest.
Mm.
And it seems to me that a lot of what you've been talking about is reorienting your thinking and manifesting things that you desire to come about. At that time, I asked you
yes.
if you were familiar with Dr. Van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score. So I just opened it. And this is where I opened it to. People who cannot comfortably notice what's going on inside become vulnerable to respond to any sensory shift, either by shutting down or by going into a panic. They develop a fear of fear itself. The experience of fear derives from primitive responses to threat, where escape is thwarted in some way. This is the part that boggled my mind. Self-regulation depends on having a friendly relationship with your body. Without it, you have to rely on external regulation from medication, drugs like alcohol, constant reassurance, or compulsive compliance with the wishes of others.
You gave me chills. Yes. It's everything we're talking about here. I just recently got certified in nervous system regulation. And what I tell people, because everybody's like, you get all these certifications, and I love learning things, but everything that I have certified myself in, I do. Because I had to learn to do it for myself. And, interestingly enough, I do workshops here on nervous system regulation. And when I do them, every time people come into them, they love them, because the whole thing we're talking about is this idea that book is talking about right there. And I told you, yes, I did remember the conversation after you started going on about the woman and all that. That book, I need to read it. I need to read it because it sounds like exactly what I'm talking about, what I've learned. And all of this is just because I've gone through this journey of self-healing, right? And I realized in the middle of all of this, like I said, it started out in the beginning with this disease, this condition that I had, right? And it took me 4 years to go through that, to start saying something has to change, Jennifer, because the path that you're on, you're not going to survive. You're not going to make it. You're not going to be here for real if you go down that path. I didn't want that. I had kids. And so I had to make a shift. And what happened when that shift started happening, what you're talking about started happening, because it was one thing I started with, and then it opened the gateway to another thing and to another thing and to another thing. And then I realized, as I started amassing all these different practices and changing belief systems, that all of this was really going back to how I had learned to survive. It was the way that I was brought up. We all do the best we can. I don't have anything against my parents, and I'm sure my kids are going to say the same things, that I've done things to them. We do what we know to do, what we were taught. And as that, Tony Robbins always talks about how we're like little 5-year-olds in adult bodies, right? We learn all these things very early on, and the body responds to that. And so if you are in constant chaos and stress, your body changes and adapts to constant chaos and stress. Right. And if you grew up believing certain things about money and life, and, I talk to people about assessing how they view themselves, how they view people, and how they view life. This was a real eye opener for me, because when I went back and started looking at those 3 things, I had bad ideas about myself. Sure, I could give you if I go into an interview, I could tell you everything I'm good, but did I really like myself deep down when I was in the trenches? No. How did I view people? I could tell you how I viewed people. They were harmful. People were not trusting. People are not to be trusted, right? They let me down. And then how did I view life? Life was hard. Everything was hard, right? That's how I was believing. That's the belief system. And when you're believing these things and living in these patterns, The body knows you're dysregulated, and that dysregulated can manifest into a lot of different things. It can be an addictions. It can be an illness. I think it's all illness really, but just showing up in very different ways. And I tell people, like a lot of these belief systems, they were showing up in my health. But what I realized over time is that those same belief systems were really wrecking other areas of my life. It wasn't just about my health. It was in the relationships, my finances, my career, everything.
I know when I cited Dr. Van der Kolk's book, you said you have to read that book. No, you don't. And I'm telling you, you don't, because you just said so many things that are in that book. And one of the other things he says, which I know you've completely figured out, is that he doesn't attempt to delegitimize stress at all. And he says that when we're children, and if we are traumatized, it's about survival. We learn how to contend with that trauma in ways that will enable us to survive.
Yeah.
Those same survival tactics or mechanisms don't translate effectively into adulthood, and we end up hurting ourselves if we don't change the methods by which we accept and adjust the things. And I want to ask you another question, because when we were talking about that spark and being able to recognize the moment, you said, and being able to turn it into something constructive and positive. This may be a semantic question, but how do we know what's constructive and positive? I actually think we all have a sense of that. But what do you think about that? It could be construed as subjective.
Yeah, this is hard. And I don't know that we know, like when we talk about the spark, because you brought that up earlier about how do we even know, I look back at my story, and the story didn't just start with the disease, right? Like there was a story before the story before the story. Like I was married, that was a bad pattern that I picked up, got rid of that one, picking up, this is what we do. I don't know that we know. I think what I would say is we have to be inquisitive. We have to be willing to look, because I don't know that we're always going to know. But I think if we go into let me just say this, when something bad happens in my world, I don't care what it is. It could be something minuscule as I had a bad conversation today, or, I overslept and missed my workout, whatever it is. I always try to look at every situation from that perspective, subject object shift, pull myself out and extract what I can take away from that situation. So I think we just have to be inquisitive is what I want to say, and be open, even if we don't believe that is the spark or that is the moment that's going to shift the change, make the change for us, right? Because no one single thing is going to be the total change of everything. We have defining moments, and we have lots of defining moments in our life. Do they make the massive change? No, the massive change comes in the day in, day out changes that we do, right? Like the little things we do every day. But there are things as we go along, we get confirmation letting us know that we're on the right path, right? And I don't know. I feel like it's like part of, like, I like to say sometimes like the little secret club society or something, where you get on this other side and you realize life is so much more fulfilling. Even when I'd say things are not perfect every day in my world, they're not, because this is reality. We live in a complex world, and we're complex human beings. I can look at my day every day and say something good has happened in my day. Whether it's a conversation, I don't know, whether it's something with my kids, I don't know, and there was a time when I couldn't do that. There was a time, I can tell you, probably for 40 something years of my life, I couldn't do that. Like I'd get up every day, I'd go into these 2-week funks is what I'd call them, where I didn't want to talk to humans. I didn't want to be, and I just would be like, okay, I guess that's the Jennifer funk. I don't know what that means. There's just something wrong with me. Right. And then I got inquisitive and started putting the pieces together. So it's a difficult thing.
I'm glad you said inquisitive, because I was in another one of those group conversations that I referred to earlier. And the gentleman who led the conversation is actually a human resources professional. So the question that he asked when he was sending us all into these little break rooms was, how do you present? And he didn't mean how do you represent or what do you represent. He meant how do you present. So when we went into the breakout room, my first comment was, I present with curiosity because I want to know. And I said, maybe that just means I'm a nosy son of a gun. I don't know, but I present with curiosity. And then later, when we were all back out of our breakout rooms into the big group, I asked this question. Do you think, I was asking the host, do you think it's possible to be curious without love? And I would like to know your thoughts on that before I tell you what his answer was. What do you think about that?
Curious without love?
Yeah.
Well, I guess if you're curious, but only for your own good, maybe like you're not seeing as you're being curious to learn how you can affect others around you. Like you're only curious because you want to learn for yourself, or curious because you want to. It's making me think of Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, where he talks about the win-win, right? Like going into a situation with how can we both win from this? And so if I'm learning, how can I take that into be better to show up and be present in a healthy way? That's how I take it.
What I meant, and you just completely got it, was that when I show up with curiosity, I show up because I want to know what makes people tick. And if you want to learn what makes people tick, each of us is not so singular,
right,
that we share nothing. Right. So if you engage with somebody who is willing to share what makes them tick, you're going to find common ground. It just happens. Let me just grab something here. I want to share something. Remember Reader's Digest?
Yep, I do.
I will tell you, I was a little kid. I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I was a little kid. And I was reading Reader's Digest. And you remember there were these little things called Point to Ponder.
Yes.
And I saved this. Somehow I managed to hang on to it for my whole life. And it's from Dr. Carl Menninger. He said, I tell myself to listen with affection to anyone who talks to me. This person is showing me his soul. It's a little dry and meager and full of grinding talk just now. But presently, he will begin to think. He will show his true self. Then he will be wonderfully alive.
Yeah.
That I don't believe a statement like that could be made without love.
Right.
And the person, and I think to be fair to him, he's in a PhD program right now, so he is highly programmed toward academics. But he said he doesn't think love has anything to do with his satisfying his intellectual curiosity. And I mean, I get that, and I kind of let it go. I didn't want to split hairs with him, but I felt like I could have made the argument that he was in love with knowledge, and
right.
he wanted to acquire what he could.
Yeah.
Right.
And no, that's good. Yeah. And I think we've all kind of maybe been in those places, right? Maybe not everybody. I feel like I was at one point where it was just, again, it goes back to the confidence, amassing the knowledge to get the skill, right? And then it changes when you understand. I think when you understand your value, I'm thinking like you can't pour from an empty wagon, right? Like when you understand your value, you can show up in a place where now you can get curious about other people and learn about other people so that you can, your job is not to make them happy all the time, right? But how do you walk away from a healthy, dialogue or conversation if you're not showing up in a place of curiosity and acceptance, love,
I agree.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to say this, but it is time for our second commercial break. So let's take that thing so we can get on the other side of it. Stay with us. We'll be back in 3 minutes.
Ready for the quantum age?
Humanity's next step in evolution?
Dreamvisions 7 Radio Network invites you to the extraordinary platform of evolutionary voices for the quantum age.
Let's explore. Learn more about this upcoming age where we bridge science with spirituality,
Where potentiality meets reality.
where we take compassion into action.
Our trailblazers and visionaries will ask the whys, the what ifs, while igniting continuous possibility.
Come along with us into an age beyond what we know today, where we can grow together in unity consciousness.
Experience evolutionary voices for the quantum age, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Eastern on Dreamvision7Radio.com.
You can't establish your brand's authority without a voice. That's why, since 2004, O'Brien Communications Group, OCG, has been helping companies establish their authority, find their brands, distinct voices, and position their brands effectively and persuasively. So effectively that 9 of OCG's clients have been acquired by other companies. OCG's business model emphasizes efficiency and results, not hourly billing, markups, and media commissions. That ensures OCG's advice is unbiased and its clients aren't at financial risk. If you're ready to find your voice and use it to tell your story, OCG is ready to help. You can find O'Brien Communications Group on the web at o'briencg.com. That's OBRIENCG.com or call 860-944-9022.
Calling all authors. Have you been considering an audiobook? Well, look no further. Come take advantage of Dreamvisions 7 Radio Network's unique in-house audiobook production, which includes benefits and bonuses from our radio station. Let our knowledgeable staff guide you to create the audiobook you've always dreamed of without breaking the bank. Check out our full one-stop service from A to Z, including the ACX process. Schedule a free consultation by calling 508-226-1723. That's 508-226-1723. Or go to dreamvision7radio.com.
Everybody has a story. Everyone's story deserves to be told, and the only bad stories are the ones we don't share. That's why Mark O'Brien created The Anxious Voyage. It's Mark's conviction that every story deserves to be shared, and his purpose is to give people in all walks of life from any circumstances a chance to tell their stories. The Anxious Voyage is now on syndicated Dreamvisions 7 Radio Network every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live broadcast every first and third Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Please tune in, please join Mark, and please share your stories.
This is Dreamvision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
Welcome back, everyone. Jennifer, thank you again for being here. This seems to be shaping up as something like book day. So I'm going to share one other thing with you. I don't know if you know this. It's called Dear Dad by the late comedian Louis Anderson. Louis Anderson's dad was an abusive alcoholic, and he passed away before Louis had his opportunity to make peace with him. So I'm just going to compress the story. He wrote a series of letters to his dad. And at one point, he took the box of letters to his dad's grave and read each one of them out loud, and then ripped it up and left it there. And I just want to share this with you because you said that life is hard and it's fulfilling. I have this theory that all we deal with in life is loss. We lose the protective comfort of the womb. We lose our mother's breast. We lose the right to mess in our pants. We lose friends, teachers, relatives. We lose our hair, our teeth, and our youth. We keep losing all these things and never get them back, but we never really learn how to deal with the loss. We never really say that it hurts, really hurts. And so we spend the rest of our lives trying to make up for it, holding on tightly to things we really should let go of. I don't believe it's possible for you to be able to say that you find something to be grateful for in every day if you didn't know that.
Yeah.
And I'm fortunate enough that I was able to read this book before my dad passed away. And I was going to say it changed my relationship with my dad, but I think I need to say, because of what I learned from it, I changed my relationship with my dad. And the first thing that I thought, the very first time I read what I just read to you, was my whole life would have been different, very different, maybe easier, if my dad had sat me down at some point, and I probably would have been younger than my dad thought I was able to understand this, and said to him, here's the deal. This whole thing is a nightmare. Life is a nightmare. It's full of pain and disappointment and loss, etc. But if you know that, then every moment that's not that, you'll celebrate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think on your journey, you learned that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you know what's coming to mind as you're telling me this? The Barbie movie that was out, as cheesy as this is, they had that Barbie movie that came out a while back, and I actually watched it, believe it or not. And I got to the end of the movie and I was like, there's actually a message in this movie, because at the end of the movie, they give Barbie the option to be human, to go out of Barbie and now become human. And she decided that she wanted to be human, because in order to be human, you could feel pain and joy. You could have feelings, right? So I'm getting chills as I'm thinking. I can't tell you anything about that movie, but that message at the end when that happened. And I realized, yes, I think that going through, I think that for me, I needed to be humbled. I think that I had all these deep pain things in my life. And I realized, I didn't want to be like that forever, but I needed to be humbled in order to be able to do what I could do today, to be able to talk about what we're talking about here, because this conversation may not have happened, 10 years ago. I was being a victim. I was playing a different game back then. Now I'm in a different place in my life where I can look at things differently and say that, yes, I do have some control in how I navigate these painful moments or these things that happen. And believe me, I don't want anybody to sit here and think right now that it's all rosy, because no, I'm dealing with a health condition right now that it affects me every single day of my life. And I've got family and I've got things going on with my kids and stuff. It is not a perfect world. And I'm not going to always say that I handle it perfectly every time, but I can say that, yes, I can still find glory in the day. I can still find good in the days. And that is coming from these things that we have to learn. They arrive at different times for us, different sparks, different moments, but it's a good feeling when you get on that side and you can do that.
I don't know if you can see on the shelf behind me all that Batman junk.
I can.
Yes. My sons and I are just complete Batman freaks, but there's a beautiful moment in the 1989 Batman movie with Michael Keaton. He and Vicky Vale are in the Batcave, and he says to her, "It's not a perfect world," but that's actually a beautiful realization. And I'm going to share this with you. We're here to be vulnerable, right? This thing that I'm holding in my hand is an appointment card from my psychiatrist. I saw my psychiatrist this morning. This is my next appointment with her. And I started to see her 26, 27 years ago.
Wow.
Because I absolutely crashed from depression. But this is what depression taught me. Darkness can only be followed by light. That's the only other thing that can happen. And so it taught me perseverance, and it taught me gratitude. And I think in a way it taught me patience, because nothing lasts forever. And it seems like the more horrible things are, the longer they seem they will last, but they don't.
Right.
And I can remember having this parallel cross my mind. I used to be a significantly more active cyclist than I am. I'm not your 5'9", 150-pound typical male cyclist. So going up hills, what's known as climbing in cycling, is really difficult and it's really painful. And I remember cranking up this hill in a state park here in Connecticut, and I was thinking, A, this hurts like hell. B, the only thing that would hurt more is if I quit, and knew I did. And C, I also knew that if I didn't quit and I got to the crest of that climb, the pain was going to be over. That was, here we go. That was a spark for me.
Yeah.
To use your term. I am starting to get fearful already that we're going to run out of time. So I would like to do a few things. One, you mentioned your book. Could you please tell our audience the name of your book and where they can find it?
Yeah, it's called Beat the Toughest Obstacles, and you can find it under my name. I'm pretty easy to find. If you get, I'm sure you'll get my name, Jennifer Loehding. It's on my website. It's also on Amazon as well.
Okay. I also want you to talk a little bit about your podcast. It's called the Starter Girlz Podcast.
Wow.
Girls is spelled GIRLZ. I also want, I hope this doesn't sound immodest. I also want people who have joined us today and who will see this recording to know that I am an official starter girl because you've invited me to be on your podcast. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
This was the only thing I wrote down before we started to talk today.
Wow.
From your podcast, what do you learn people struggle with most?
Oh, I think a lot of it is like imposter syndrome, right? Like the believing that they can do it. I have interviewed over 500 people between my shows, and I will tell you, in all the years I was in Mary Kay, like I learned things, but I have learned so much in the last 5 years talking to people on my podcast. And I think, yeah, a lot of it is getting through the imposter syndrome, believing that they can do what they set out to do, right? It goes back to all this stuff we've been talking about.
I was talking to a woman one day, and she's a big believer in Simon Sinek and his book. What is it called? Start with Why, or What's Your Why, or something.
Yeah.
So she asked me if I could tell her my why in 5 words. So my standard joke is that because I'm a writer, I cheated and I hyphenated. But I said to her, I write to restore self-faith. And then I paused for a moment and I said, and I don't mean mine. But I find the same thing you do. And it doesn't always occur to me to call it imposter syndrome. But I can never fully understand why people don't trust themselves more, why they don't have that kind of self-faith.
Yeah.
I don't know if your podcast has given you any insight, but
yeah, well, I think it just goes back from when we were kids and we were told no and got, just our formal years of going through education. It's like we were taught the scientific method, and we don't see it, we don't believe it, right? That's a joke. But my point to this is,
it's not a joke. Yeah,
somewhere along the line, we have gotten into this idea that we have to think inside the box. We're afraid to go against, the norms. And to your point, when you were mentioning the starter girls, like I could have easily put an S on the end of girls, but when we created this show, I didn't want to be I didn't want it to be like everybody else would have thought to do it. I wanted to be different because there's nothing that I do that I want to be the sameness. It's a struggle every day because we're taught to do this. And I think all of that is bottled from that, because when we step out, there's that fear of rejection, right? And the only reason I brought up, I said the word imposter syndrome is just because I just finished up doing a quiz about this. And that's one of the 6 blocks that come up for a lot of entrepreneurs people you think have it all together. That will be their highest block, is this imposter syndrome. So I think it just stems back from, when we had to conform in early years and we were told not to talk. I use the example of, getting in trouble for talking all the time as a young child. And now here I am doing a podcast. I mean, what are the odds of that, right? Like my gift was talking. Clearly I was using it as a child and I was getting told to shut up. If I'd have listened to that, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now, right?
It's funny. I just this morning responded to a post on LinkedIn, commented in the post. Somebody had written an article about ADHD. Shared an article about ADHD that pointed out that there are ways in which it's misunderstood and could be advantageous. For a while, I had a psychologist for a client, and his specialty was learning and behavioral disorders in children. And he was militantly anti-medication, and he used neurofeedback training. But he said that he considered ADHD to be an advantage, and that the reason that children in public schools are considered to be disruptive if they have ADHD is that they're trying to bring everybody else up to what he called their attentional threshold, because they're so far ahead of everybody else. I can just imagine when you were in school, you were talking because you were probably so far ahead of everybody else. You were probably saying things that seemed obvious to you, but probably weren't terribly obvious to everybody else.
Yeah, my mom used to say that she would tell the teacher to give me extra work because I would get bored. But I never officially got diagnosed with ADHD, but I will tell you 2 of my kids did. And I have had to deal with this over the years. I had a teacher, an art teacher, tell me once back when they were in grade school, she said, I don't have to say anything more than once to a Loehding kid because I get that look. I need to stop talking because we've already heard it, So yes. And I did have, to your point, I did have a gal come on my show that was actually an attorney for the government. And she went into ADHD coaching, and she kind of brought that same message that it's actually a gift. We try to say it's a disability, but ADHD people are thinking on a different level. They're problem solving on the continual. I mean, and they bring a certain gift to the table that we a lot of times don't recognize. She even told the story about like in meetings, like where everybody will be talking about something for 2 years. They've already got it figured out. They're already at A to F. They don't even need to talk about B through E. Yeah,
I agree. Just before we go, you have shared the title of your book. Please tell folks where they can find the Starter Girlz podcast, and if that is the best place to find and contact you.
Yes, it's Starter Girlz. It's startergirlz.com. You can go there. We're on Amazon, iHeart, Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. So pretty easy to find us.
Okay. Jennifer, I can't thank you enough for being on here today. And sorry, I'm just going to say this. You are such a beautiful, vibrant woman. The idea that you've dealt with the physical challenges that you have is mind-blowing to me and inspirational. Thank you.
Thank you.
I thank everybody else who joined us today. I will be back on the first Monday in April. We'll see you then. Take care.
Thank you for tuning into The Anxious Voyage, the program dedicated to sharing stories, helping people, and celebrating life. You can see and listen to The Anxious Voyage on syndicated Dreamvisions 7 radio network every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live broadcast every first and third Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. If you have a story to tell, or if you know someone who does, please email the host, Mark O'Brien, at mark@o'briencg.com. In the meantime, please remember, the only bad stories are the ones we don't share.
This is Dreamvisions 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.